Okay, so got a great one for you this week. First, I'm going to talk about the spin model, which was devised by Neil Rackham, which is essentially a model of selling in B2B sales, that's business-to-business sales, which, I'll just walk you through it, do a bit of an overview, and explain it with also some examples as I go through as well. After that, I'm going to give you a pretty honest explainer on my first ever sales call. And then I will talk a little bit about sleep, how I've not been getting enough of it, and the value of sleep, and then also kind of leading in finally to some stuff about my health anxiety as well. So sit back, enjoy if you can, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. So this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be teaching you about what I've learned from Neil Rackham's book about spin selling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set out what is this model, what is the spin model, kind of show you how it works, what context you should be using it in, and then also kind of walk you through a little case study or perhaps more of a role play, but except I'm not going to do any voices or anything like that. I can do voices if you want, but the only voices that I want to deal with are the ones in my head. So what is the background to the spin model? Essentially, Neil Rackham observed that there wasn't actually very much research into a lot of the accepted wisdoms within the world of selling. So what he noticed was things like closing, for example. It's something that people absolutely loved, and everyone said, "Oh, you have to be a great closer to finish a sale." And it turned out that closing it doesn't work. And it's not that it doesn't work, but it doesn't work in specifically high value sales, because Neil Rackham noticed that there is a distinction between large and low value sales, whereas a lot of the sales literature made no distinction between the two. And the reason behind that, there are many, but essentially because a high value sale, because of its nature, it's large, there are multiple decision makers involved in the decision. And that means that even if a single individual appears to be making the decision, other people will be looking into it, and so they'll feel accountable if something goes wrong. And so the decision making process becomes much more rational. And a lot of closing techniques and a lot of smaller sale techniques involve pressuring people into making a decision, and that's all well and good when you've got them there and then. But the problem is that in large ticket sales, there are often many stages, many processes to go through, and there's a big gap between the actual sale that you make and the decision that the decision maker makes. And in that time, pressure just disappears. Because what you've done in the pressure situation, you haven't actually changed their mind. You just forced them to make the decision that you want them to make. Whereas when you have that gap in time, the pressure dissipates, and then also they no longer it's their decision again. They are back in the driving seat. And so what is most important is that in a high value sale is that you actually convince them that this is something that is worth doing. And this is something that I really like about the model, because although you are obviously using psychology to an extent, because you always are, to in a way manipulate people, but I don't like the use of the word because it implies it's doing something bad for them. But you are using psychology, yes, to get them to change their mind. But a big core of the spin model is that actually you need to give them legitimate, rational reasons to buy your product and to show that your product is suitable for them and actually solves their problems, which is, I would say it feels like pretty ethical sales. So, yeah, one of the other contentions about it is that, I suppose that one of the distinctions that it makes is that a lot of the time when people sell, they just give a sales pitch. They have a sales pitch. They talk at the customer. And what Neil Rackham showed was that the most effective salespeople don't just talk at that. In fact, the most effective salespeople talk far less than the customer talks throughout the call. Because when you're selling, you're convincing someone to change their mind. And when you're convincing someone to change their mind, well, you don't change their mind. They change their mind. And so you need to help guide them into that change process. So how does the spin model work? So we're going to start. There's essentially, I think, 4 stages to the sale. So you have the preliminaries, which are basically the opening moments of the sale, where you just go, oh, okay, who am I? What am I here for? What's the purpose of this call? Whatever. Now, there is a common thing that people say, which is that first impressions are everything. And maybe that's true, but within the context of larger sales, what was shown by Neil Rackham's Research Institute was that actually the preliminaries didn't really matter at all. Some of the most effective salespeople actually had really awkward openings to calls because they weren't natural at doing that. And it didn't matter. They were still rated as highly effective salespeople by their clients, because ultimately what people care about is whether you can show that you're listening to them and that you are effectively solving their problems. And that's what clients will value a lot more than those initial 5 seconds, because they will get swept up and engaged in the fact that, oh my God, this is actually a salesperson who cares, right? Who actually wants to solve my problems. I like this person. So you then have your investigating stage, which is basically you just getting out there and trying to find out as much as you can about the client and their situation and kind of build up the issue. I'll go into more depth in a little bit, but this is the most important stage of any sales call. Then you have the demonstrating capability stage, which is essentially your sales pitch. You want to do this towards the end of the call. This is not something you want to be doing early. If you start giving your sales pitch at the start of the call, then, I mean, obviously it depends on a case-by-case basis, but generally it's not been an effective call and you are not leveraging the spin model properly. And then your final one is obtaining commitment, which is obviously super important, but it's something you should be doing at the very end. Because, yeah, I mean, you need to get some sort of commitment from a customer, otherwise it's not been a successful call. So let's go first back to the preliminaries. I've spoken about them already to a fair degree. So the only extra thing here is that the only important thing really that you need to do in your preliminaries is to establish your right to ask questions to the customer, because really the entire sales process hinges on your ability to ask questions. And if your customer, it's very rare that you establish that and then your customer fights back and says, no, I'm asking the questions. So yeah, you want to start establishing your role as the person who's seeking information. Oh, I just want to find out a little bit more about you, whether this product would fit for you. And pretty much in every situation, they're going to go, yeah, okay, that's fair enough, because you are sort of in the driving seat of most sales calls. So now we get to the investigating stage. So this is where the SPIN model comes into effect. So SPIN, what does it stand for? It is situation, problem, implication, and needs payoff. And that is basically the order of questions that you should be asking. So situation questions are your very basic, just trying to find out a bit about the customer, their context, what's going on in their business. P, the problem questions. Now, this is often where people finish. So people go, oh yeah, we'll ask some problem questions. It's really, it's what it says on the tin. You're just asking a customer about their problems. And what will often happen is then they will develop, they will admit that they have some sort of problem. But the mistake that most people make is that, okay, the person will say, oh, I've got a 2% error rate in this particular medical procedure at my hospital, right? They'll say, yeah, I've got a 2% error rate, and then you go, oh, well, my product halves the error rate, and then you go into your pitch. You should not do that. And the reason is because in large ticket sales, customers often know that they have a problem, but because it is a large sale, you need to justify to them why that problem is actually worth spending all this money to fix. Because it's like, yes, I do have a 2% error rate on this particular procedure, which is, by the way, abysmal, I know, but it's just an example. But yeah, yes, I do have a 2% error rate. However, why is that an issue? Like, well, okay, cool, I have a 2% error rate. We're doing fine. We don't need anything. And you as a salesman might be able to look at that and go, oh, well, this is terrible. You know, I can massively fix everything. It doesn't matter, because your customer needs to first recognize it as a problem. And what they call it in the book is your customer has just expressed an implied need. So there is an implied need that they need to reduce their error rates. However, they are not at the point where they actually think they need to do anything about it, and they have not asked you to fix that problem. So they say, oh yeah, our error rates are a little bit high, but you know, we do just fine, and it's not too much of an issue. So that's where the I comes in, the implication questions. So the whole point of the implication questions is, think of them as negative problem-based questions. You are trying, in a way, to make the customer feel depressed, because what you want to do is you want to build up the magnitude of the problem to the customer. So asking things like, well, okay, well, what are those error rates costing you? And that's a very basic one, and I think maybe it will help if I then move on to sort of do like a case study. But then you have your needs payoff questions, which are much happier and solutions based, because you don't want your clients just to be feeling depressed. You want to get them to start thinking, get excited, and to start thinking about the solution to the problem, because it's when you get them into that frame of mind that you can start getting them to ask for explicit needs. Oh yeah, I do want to fix this issue. And then you can say, well, here's my sales pitch. So implication questions, what are these? Essentially, you're trying to build up the scale of the problem in the client's head, as I've sort of alluded to already. And you can ask questions, things like, what is X costing you? Okay? But I'm going to try and give you, I've written a script that's sort of like just a single sheet of A4, and it lays out how sort of these sales conversations go, and how you start using these implication questions to build up that problem. So the setting here is that I'm selling a medical device to a hospital. Now, it doesn't matter what the price is. The price is expensive, and so it's something that they would think twice about buying. So, you know, I start off just chatting with the purchasing manager. I say to me, do you do many of these procedures every year? Well, we do about 300 of these procedures every year, but as a hospital, we do about 400,000 operations every year, so it's quite minor in the grand scheme of things. It's not really a focus area of ours. I see. So how high are your error rates for procedure X? 2%. It's not great, but it's about standard for the industry. And as I mentioned, since it's such a small share of our surgeries, it's not something we're really keen on improving. So you get 6 patients who have some sort of mistake made in their surgery each year. I assume that they have to undergo some other operation. How much does that cost? Well, yeah, after they've recovered, we like to get them back in as soon as possible. So the surgeries cost themselves about $60,000 per surgery. After they've recovered. So does that mean that they spend that time in hospital waiting for their next operation? Yes. Yeah, these procedures can't wait, and we want to show our patients that we care. I completely understand. How long does that recovery period normally take? It's quite a nasty surgery, so recovery takes about 10 days. 10 days? And how much does it normally cost per day to have those beds occupied? Well, you've got the food, monitoring, not to mention the salaries of the staff on the shift, and the fact that the space is scarce. We estimate that it costs around $2,000 per day. So you spend an extra $60,000 on the surgery, $20,000 on patient recovery. That's nearly $500,000 a year just on your errors. It's more than I thought, but it's an unfortunate cost of running a hospital. And so, yeah, okay, well, what about afterwards? I could imagine patients getting quite upset at having mistakes in their procedures. Do you ever get legal troubles? Don't get me started. Some patients are quite understanding, but it takes just a couple of court cases to rack up the legal fees, not to mention the stress it causes the doctors. How much were your legal costs relating to the procedure this year? This year is looking to be a little bit lower, at around $1.1 million, but last year we spent $1.3 million. So you're spending over $1 million each year because of your error rates. Yeah, when you put it like that, our error rates are costing us quite a lot. I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier as well. You said that the recovery period is 10 days. Is that because this procedure is invasive? Partly, yes. So the invasive nature means that it takes a lot out of our patients. It's also just a very tricky procedure with a lot of complications. So we like to be doubly sure that we discharge them, but it is made harder by the fact that the procedure is invasive. So with that $2,000 a day number, we can say that you're spending about $20,000 per patient on a normal recovery, or across the entire procedure, you're spending about $6 million a year just on patient recoveries. Is that right? Wow. Yeah, that does sound right. I can't believe how much that creeps up on us as a hospital. This procedure is quite a problem. You also said that it being invasive makes it a harder procedure. Do staff have to be specially trained to perform it? Unfortunately, yes. We only have a few staff to hand at the moment who can perform it because 2 just left. Your staff left. Are they the first to leave this year? No, we've had 4 leave actually. It's a pain, if I'm honest. How much does it cost and how long does it take to recruit a replacement? It costs about $15,000 per doctor, and it takes about 4 months. Our staff are working overtime, though, so it hasn't affected our ability to perform the procedures. Do you think that the difficulty of the procedure, relatively high error rates, and working overtime might be causing your staff to leave? It's costing you about $60,000 at the moment. Now, I could keep going, and there were certain points in there that even as I was writing the script, I was picking up on and go, okay, how do I go and talk? The other issues, basically, that you could have picked up on throughout that, and maybe you did. But the point is, if you go back through it, what you want to be looking for, you're digging for questions, for problems that you can then build up and turn into bigger ones. And I know you probably listened to that and went, well, come on, that was a written script, it's not the same. And you're right, it's not the same. How could anybody possibly come up with all of that on the spot? Well, although it isn't the same, and you're never going to perform the same in real life as you will on a script, the fact is, it's actually easier to do than you think, because the best salespeople plan their calls before they go on. I did not just write that script willy-nilly. Well, I did, but what I first did was I developed I followed the framework and tried to look at, well, what does my product solve? And then what problems do I think the customer has? Because obviously I'm trying to solve those problems, but then from those problems, you're trying to find implications. So, for example, I've got here, higher error rates in surgeries. What does that cause? Well, patients have to undergo multiple surgeries. They spend more time in beds. They have higher legal costs because they are getting sued by their patients, understandably. I had other ones on here which I didn't do, like doctors getting demoralized because they want to help people, but they're having massively high error rates and hurting people. And then what does that cause, having demoralized doctors? Well, then I got into that on the other one, because you've got invasive surgeries where it's a more complicated surgery. You need more staff maybe around. It means people having to work overtime. You have more attrition. And the point is, you need to just keep digging and frame your questions around those problems that you've already planned for. And you know what? Maybe they don't have any of those problems. And if not, then that's fine, because the product isn't right for them. But at the same time, there's a good chance, well, it's either that or you've had bad planning. But with practice, you can start to come up with problems that you can then develop and help people. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's important to do. It's vitally important to do, but it's not the final step. Because the thing is, all you have done is develop implicit needs. Even if this person is going, wow, I've got this massive problem, you need to start getting them to tell you that they need to fix the problem. And so this is where the needs payoff, the needs payoff questions come in. So the needs payoff questions are the positive ones. So you need to ask things like, so is it important for you to solve this, $6 million a year that you're spending on recoveries to reduce patient recovery times? And they're probably going to go, yes, yeah, I mean, it would be so great. And it would be so great, it would cost us less money. And then you can say, well, how else would it help you that patients are spending less time in beds? And then they'll go, well, it means that we can bring other patients in. We're not as overloaded. Our staff can provide better care to the patients that are still in the ward. And you basically want to go egging them on and getting them to sell it so that they have all these additional benefits. Because the fact is, no one can sell inside an organization better than the people who are inside that organization, because they know their needs far better than any salesman ever could. So you just need to start getting them excited, thinking about all these opportunities. And from there, it's really just, well, it's not plain sailing, but it's out of your hands. And that's what's important, is that you need to almost be coaching this individual to go and sell for you. Beyond that, it's then the point of, then you go on to your sales pitch. And once you have developed, they say, well, we need to reduce the recovery time on our patients. We need to reduce our error rates because we have all these legal costs that are sky high. Then you go in and say, well, I have a medical device that reduces surgical error rates from 2% to 1%, or means that patients spend on average 1.5 fewer days in bed for this procedure. Now, something that is important about needs payoff questions is that you shouldn't be asking them early in the call. It has been shown to reduce your chances, or reduce the success of the call. And then, it's only then, so yeah, we've done demonstrate capability, and then at the very end, you're trying to obtain commitment from the client. Now, what does obtaining commitment mean? It does not actually mean that you're going to go and make an instant sale, because you might have to do this several times. But what you often do, well, what you need to do is you need to first you need to ask the client, hey, have I covered all your key concerns? And then what you want to do is you want to summarize the things that you have spoken about in the call. Summarize the benefits of what you're offering. Say, we reduce stays in hospital beds. We can reduce your error rates by half, saving you extra surgeries, associated legal costs, reduce staff turnover rather, help get the union off your back, things like that. So not all of it that I covered, but the point is, you want to then keep relating to all their problems and then how you're going to solve those problems. And the final thing is you then want to try and secure some sort of commitment from the client, whether that is an advance or a sale. So an advance is essentially agreeing with the client to advance down the sales process, whether that's you're going to have a meeting with their superior, or you're going to bring in some of their doctors for a product demonstration. Something like that is an advance. Agreeing to meet again in 6 months with no real benefit or anything like that, that's called a continuation. And some salespeople consider it a success, but in reality, it's not a success because it moves you no closer to a sale. And one of the key things he actually talks about is the idea of building a relationship is generally, it's just false. And it's not that you can't build a relationship, but having the objective of building a relationship, the sole objective of building a relationship it's just kind of it's a sign of an ineffective salesperson. Now, what are the signs of an effective salesperson? To sort of wrap all of that up, well, effective salespeople always plan their calls, but importantly, they always review their calls. Now, we're going to move on to my next section, which is my review of my first sales call. Now, I've given it all of this about what I've learned from this book. And does that mean that I'm now some master salesman? No, it does not. In fact, I'm going to tell you about my first sales call that I had. And by that, I mean my first sales call that I had where I was alone it was just me ringing out on an inbound inquiry. And yeah, it was pretty dire, I'll be honest with you. But, you know, it's not something that bothers me that it was dire, because, you know, it was my first call, and ultimately I know how I can get better. So it's not the end of the world. It was also it was a bad inquiry. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't something I was too hung up over. But that being said, what happened? Well, I rang up this individual, and what did I do right? Well, I did ask some of the qualifying questions when I first got in, but I was not natural at either the pitch, but also there were some qualifying questions that I just completely forgot to ask, and I started stammering and stuff. Like it was almost like okay, shit, I'm now in the moment. My mind has gone blank. What do I do? And you know, that wasn't good. It wasn't good. And like I did get through the call. Did have a bit of a chat with him, but oh my god, you know, it was not a good call, definitely. So yeah, it was something that I definitely need to improve on, but I think it helps. It doesn't help that my planning that I did was not particularly good, and actually just writing the script and planning for that script really did help me. Well, it taught me how to actually plan for the sales call, and I wasn't just doing my own planning method. I was following the method from the book, whereas I sort of rushed my planning for him. And you know, you can't plan every time, but I think it's fair to say I'm still in the early stages, and I need to learn. I still haven't learned I suppose the default questions, the default problems that people have. Although I understand the value of the services that we provide, I haven't developed into a common framework that I can use as like a fallback if things go wrong. So it's kind of like, right, it's the plan or nothing at the moment. So so that's definitely something I need to work on. But I'm looking forward to my next call, because ultimately it can only get better. So something I have been thinking about is the value of sleep. Now, this doesn't really sound particularly profound, right? Everyone knows, it's important to get a good night's sleep, but I don't think everyone actually knows. It's because I've got a Whoop. This is not a paid advertisement. I have a Whoop strap, and for those of you that don't know, a Whoop is basically, it's a fitness wearable that tracks a lot of your health data, including things like your heart rate variation, your resting heart rate. I can't even remember the other ones now. Body temperature, things like that, to kind of figure out what your recovery is, and then it can also see what your it can track basically how much strain you're putting your body under throughout the day, and it is I really like it. I think it's a great product, but I'm not here to promote it. I'm just here to, like, one of the things it does is it tracks your sleep, and so because of that, I get to see how much sleep I'm getting every night, and I get a recovery score every morning. And I've noticed that my sleep has deteriorated. And yeah, just sleep is really important. And I am a high energy person, so I've noticed I can function pretty well even if I haven't had a great night's sleep, and I can still go for it the next day. But I do notice at the end of the week, if it's not been a very productive week sleep-wise, I do start to, it catches up to me. And it's something I'd love to improve, because ultimately it's one of the few free lunches you're going to get. Because, I mean, if you look at just evolution, how many animals out there have evolved to not need to sleep? And the answer is none, as far as I'm aware anyways, but none, because there must be some evolutionary advantage to sleep. And, you know, it expands your brain, It helps you supposedly log your memories. It's really important for muscle recovery. And I want to get more. I want to get more sleep. I'm trying, some of the things that I'm trying at the moment are, I'm trying to make my room colder, because apparently that helps you sleep, or helps you get deeper sleep. I need to somehow improve my sleep efficiency so that I can actually fall asleep faster, because it's just something that I'm not great at falling asleep quickly. I take quite a long time. I can take about up to an hour to fall asleep, which is not normal, which I used to think it was normal, but after speaking to a lot of people and doing a bit of Googling, 1 hour to fall asleep is not at all normal. But I can't stop, because my mind is always racing. So I start like meditating before I go to bed to try and clear my mind. But something I'm going to try as well is I'm going to get some magnesium, and just give that a go. And I'll keep you updated on what the results are. But yeah, it's a shame, because I've generally had pretty good sleep hygiene, and I've generally had pretty good sleep. So not sure exactly what it is that I'm doing, what I've changed in my lifestyle apart from starting a job. So yeah, we're going to find out. And and then this, that point kind of leads nicely on to something else that I've been thinking about. And so I talked about it, I think, last week, and it was how I used to have health anxiety or panic disorder or whatever. And I realized this week that I think I've known deep down, but then also, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it properly. And I've always kind of assumed, because I had this therapy, and I was like, right, I'm better now, and it's not a problem. And to be fair, it's not nearly as much of a problem, but the underlying causes of it, I've realized, are actually still there, and that I do have, or I have had, and this underlying anxiety about my health, where, because I thought it was gone. And the context for this is that I've had experiences, say, when I went traveling, where I would start getting panicked and go, okay, I think I'm going to die. And then I also had an experience just the other day where in the gym, I pulled a muscle in my arm, or I injured my tricep while training, and it's fine, right? My tricep is absolutely fine. But in that moment, I suddenly felt my arm go like super, super tight. And I started to feel lightheaded, dizzy. Because I've been a little bit ill. And because I've been genuinely ill, lately, I think I have, like acid reflux or whatever, and that's fine. But because I think I have it, I almost have like legitimized the fact that I'm like, okay, I'm not healthy again. And the moment, and so I'm getting things like chest pain, and it's like, okay, is it a heart attack? And it's like, no, it's not. And the reason I know it's not is because, well, there's just lots of signs that it is something different, okay? And it's like for example, if I breathe deeply, it hurts, which you don't get. The pain is constant with a heart attack. So the point is, it's not, like, I know it isn't, but I've built up again in my head that, I'm unhealthy, even though I live an exceptionally healthy lifestyle. I would say I'm probably in the top, like, 2 to 5% of the country health-wise. Like, I'm a very healthy person. I eat clean. I exercise a lot. I go to the sauna. I have cold showers. I gear a lot of my life, whether that's from having vitamins, and I gear a lot of my life to look after my body, because ultimately health is wealth, baby. But no, seriously, our body it carries us inside, right? And your body, if you let it, is a constraint on your ability to function, and you need to reduce, or you need to extend all of those constraints as much as possible to allow you to work well within them. And that's why I think it's really important to look after yourself. Now, that being said, I think that a lot of my attitude to myself kind of assumes that I'm unhealthy. I kind of think, well, what if it's this? Oh, I could be in like the 0.1%. And I've had this underlying belief that I am unhealthy, despite the fact that I know it's not true. Essentially, another, pretty major panic attack while I was in the gym. And one of the PTs said that I look like a sheet because my face had gone so white. And yeah, it kind of got me thinking and going, right, I actually need to confront this and start actually thinking about my health in terms of what is rational, how healthy am I? Because I know I'm healthy. I know that whenever I've gone to the doctor, and if they do like bloods or take my blood pressure, they go, wow, you're like textbook. You're textbook healthy, which is what you want to hear, right? But even then, I still have this belief that I'm not. So yeah, it's something that I need to actually start confronting about myself, and I'm starting to do that. I think that, with all of these things, it's kind of with all mental health, it's a constant battle, or not battle, but it never ends, right? And you have to constantly be checking yourself and monitoring yourself. And I think I kind of grew a bit complacent, and I went, okay, I'm fine, because I'd managed to deal with the panic attacks and I wasn't getting them all the time. But actually, I think that I had more to do in terms of battling my underlying anxieties. So yeah, I think it's something that I'm gonna continue to work on, but I'm confident I can now that I've identified it. So the final point, really, that I want to talk about is a book that I've been reading, which I'm not going to talk about anymore because I've already talked about one book, but it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a really good book, and I'm currently taking notes on it. It's another self-help type thing. Well, actually, Neil Rackham is about selling, so what the fuck am I talking about? But it is a self-help book, and I've really enjoyed it so far, and I've been writing things like my own constitution, my own personal mission statement, and yeah, it's a lot of it is because I've read a fair number of self-help books before, and just I've listened to a lot of podcasts, not necessarily about self-help, but just with people who are very, I suppose, emotionally stable on it. And so I kind of, there were a lot of things which I already picked up on, but it's nice to see it all put together very nicely. So it's going to be something that I'm going to probably do next time, because it's a really good book and I'd like to share it with you. Other than that, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great couple of weeks. See you later.